All right, what's the goal of all Christian instruction? Worship, yes. And so I don't have a worship slide, but I want y'all to remember that as you break up into your groups. So you guys are going to break up into whichever groups you want. Introduce yourself, say your name, and then I want you to talk about when you hear the word Advent, what comes to mind? Are there any traditions? Are there any experiences, songs, books, anything that comes to mind when you hear the word Advent? And so you'll break up into your groups. We'll be back in our groups a couple of times tonight, so feel free to do it however you like, but make sure you guys get each other's names as well. And then if you have a favorite Advent tradition, be sure to share that as well. All right, got it? All right, let's do it. Okay, I'll bring you guys back. I'll bring you back. All right, so what were some of the things that you guys talked about when you hear Advent? Calendar. What kind of calendar? Chocolate. How many of y'all got a chocolate calendar sent to you? Yeah. Anybody still getting them? Like in your childhood, like a great aunt send one to you?
Childhood. I got really bad chocolate too.
Part chocolate, part wax. Chocolate flavored wax. Did you do it every day, or did you like eat them?
We didn't really. It had cute little pictures in it when we opened it though.
Yeah. So did you like eat them all on the day one?
It was bad chocolate. It was really bad.
Oh, no, they just bad chocolate.
Did you eat it all on day one? Day one. My brother did too. My brother ate them all on day one and then negotiated with me on future days for my chocolate. And then he would usually lose control at about day 12 and just eat all mine. And he knew I was going to be like, whatever. Yeah, I had a great aunt that would send them to me. And so I was at Michael's the other day looking at Christmas wrapping paper, and they had a whole wall of them. And I was like, oh, yeah. And then they had some, like, naughty ones. And I was like, okay, that just, like, does not comport. Like, I'm having, like, this nostalgic moment. And then I was like, whoa, no. So what else comes to mind when you hear Advent?
Swedish Lutherans.
Swedish Lutherans. Why?
Because that's how I knew about Advent.
American Girl doll. She had one of those.
Oh.
Swedish relatives have like an Advent wreath.
It's very niche. We went really niche. Did anybody have traditions or experiences in your homes? Like, did y'all have like Jesse Tree? I know is a big one right now.
Coloring book pages
Every
every day.
day. Had to or got to? Had to. Okay, so unpleasant. Did anybody have a happy memory of Advent? Does anybody enjoy Advent? Like, I had to go to tap class. You didn't do Advent?
I didn't know what Advent was until
Okay.
college, so I've never heard of it.
But the candlelight. So were you?
At church or at your home?
Oh, at church.
So did anyone have a parent or an adult in their life that said, hey, we're going to dedicate time to Advent in our home?
I mean, we did with the coloring book pages.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I don't think it's that common in evangelical spaces. Like, I think it's like, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I tutored for a living all through seminary, so I would be in people's homes a lot. So you learn a lot about them. And I remember I would go into Jewish homes, and they would clearly have the menorah out, and you could tell like they were lighting candles every night as a family. And then they would talk to me about the menorah and things like that. And I remember I'd go into all these homes that I knew to be of Christians, and there was no like equivalent nightly thing, at least nothing that was out. So like I grew up in a non-Christian home, so we got Advent calendars from my crazy Aunt Betty. That's what we got. Okay, well, let's talk about Advent then, because what we're going to do tonight is we're going to briefly talk about Advent, what it is, where it came from, and then we're going to jump into hope. And the next few weeks, the weeks of Advent go hope, peace, joy, love. And we're going to then, each week, we're going to take one facet of those. And so tonight is a little bit of Advent and a lot of hope, and we'll talk about it. But it's going to be very interactive. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation. So Advent, it comes from a Latin word, Adventus, and just means arrival or coming. And it's the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas that allow the Christian church to celebrate what Christ's arrival means to the world. So it's just a cutout time. It's a little bit like Lent would be the equivalent as we get ready for Easter. And typically the weeks highlight, like I said, hope, peace, joy, and love. And if you've seen our candle wreaths at church, what you have is the typical way that you do it is you have 3 purple candles, and then you have a pink candle and you have a white candle. And so the hope and peace and love are purple. Joy is pink. And then there's a white candle in the center that represents Christ. And so you take time. And so if you've never been to St. Jude during Advent, like this Sunday, the Lions are up, and they're going to have our readings from the Word of Hope, and they're going to light one candle. Then the next week, I think it's the lads, and they'll read the peace ones, and then they'll light. The hope candle will already be lit. It burns for 7 straight days. I'm just kidding. So we'll light it, and then they'll light that, and then on and on we go. And then Jim will do week 4, and the Christ candle are going to be collapsed into 1 week. So where did Advent come from? Because it's not actually in the Bible. There's no passage that says this is how we celebrate leading up to Christmas. And actually, the best we can tell from the historical accounts is that Advent actually started as a season of fasting for people who desired to be a part of the church. They would often make them go into a season of fasting prior to their first baptism. And so their first baptism was their full entrance into the church as members. And so they would do baptisms on Epiphany Sunday. And Epiphany Sunday is the Sunday that it's 2 weeks after Christmas, and we celebrate when the Magi made it to Jesus. If you think the Magi were there on the night he was born, you're wrong. They're there 2 weeks later every year. No, I'm just kidding. But we always celebrate Epiphany Sunday 2 weeks after Christmas. And so that season of fasting and preparation took on a Christmas theme sometime. It didn't originally start as that. It looked more like Lent. And then over time they said, hey, this season of fasting and all that, it's kind of at the same time as Christmas. And then it took on a Christmas feel. And then by the Middle Ages, Advent as an official season stuck. And so we've been celebrating Advent as a church, we being the Church Universal, since the Middle Ages. But it wasn't from the beginning. So when people are like, well, Advent's not in the Bible, I'm like, yes, it's not. No, it's just something that Christian churches for a long time have said, hey, we think this is a healthy way to celebrate the coming of Christmas. One other thing, there's some churches that do hope, peace, joy, and love, and then there are other churches that do the first 2 weeks are weeks of preparation. So you celebrate like the coming of the Messiah, and then the next 2 weeks you celebrate that he has come, and then you celebrate Christmas. So I prefer the way that we do it, but that's just there. And so most churches, if you're celebrating Advent at all, so not in most churches, but churches that celebrate Advent, it's a time for pausing from normal church, and you're focused on the coming of Christmas in Christ. And so how many of y'all would say that the music changed? You might not have called it Advent at church, but the music changed. Did it change to Christmas songs or Advent songs? Christmas, okay. Martin is a little persnickety about this. So there are Advent songs which sing about, O come, Emmanuel, is a prototypical Advent song. He hasn't come yet, we're calling for him to come. Christmas song is like, joy to the world. Oh, Holy Night is both. The world lay in sin and error pining. And you know why it's both? Because I petitioned so hard. There is one line, long lay the world in sin and error pining. And so I'm like, that's an Advent song, Mark. It is not. It's not. In no church hymnal will you ever find it in the Advent section. However, it happens to be my favorite. So, and I like to sing it for more than 2 weeks. And so I have requested it every year, and I don't think we've sung it more than once, at St. Jude. I'm like, I think it's because Celine covered it. And I wouldn't want to sing a song that Celine covered, so I don't blame the guys.
Can we do like a flash mob at church?
Just do it anyways?
Someone just start singing?
So on the 13th, we're going to have our St. Jude 6-year anniversary celebration / Christmas carols. And I told Martin, I was like, it gets to be Christmas. Martin, it's not a Sunday. It's not liturgical. It's not. And he was like, okay, fine. And so I think I can form my flash mob there. He's so funny about it because he's not, y'all know Mara. He's pretty loosey-goosey about a lot of things. Not that. We don't even celebrate Christmas Eve at our church. We celebrate Christmas Eve at our church and have for 6 years. But anyways, so this is basically the history of Advent, how we got to where we are today. So, but now we're going to translate. We're going to talk about hope. So I want you to get back into your groups. And I want you to describe hope without using any Christian jargon. So imagine you're talking to your non-believing friend, or maybe they're a friend who grew up in the church and they just can't hear words like, the incarnation. They don't want to hear any Christian jargon. How would you describe hope to that person? Now, I'm not saying you can't use words that show up in the Bible, but just no Christianese. All right, let's hear it. How do we define hope if you can't use Christian jargon?
Larry has an acronym.
Let's hear it.
Well, there might be one word that's questionable.
We'll be the judge of that.
Have our perspective eternal.
That's pretty Christian. I mean, I don't know how y'all going to... No, I'm just kidding. All right, we'll take it. Anything else from there? Does it have to be eternal?
But positive anticipation, it's a different perspective.
positive anticipation. That's a good way of saying it. What about you guys?
We said lots of different things that kind of honed around like a positive anticipation, wishing, longing for an end result that is good, and that because that's what it is, you also then are looking external. There's something outside of you that you're seeking.
Do you enjoy defining it without Christian jargon?
No.
Why?
Because it really isn't hope.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, because why? There is something external, right? What?
For us, it's God.
So could someone have hope? According to y'all's definitions, outside of Christ.
Well, I'm thinking of people like maybe the Ukrainians, they hope the war will end.
Yeah. Why would they have any confidence that they're going to make it through?
Perseverance.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are people that have hope. Like, I'm not sitting here saying, there's not, I think you're right. I think there's an embodiment of hope in non-believers because God is good. And that exists. However, I want you to have a hard time defining it because I think all of you are intuiting something that we're going to talk about, which is there is something beyond the circumstance that is why you then hope. And that is different than optimism. Like, we know optimistic people, but a lot of times we're like, they're just an idiot waiting to run into a trap. Like, we try to sell them oceanfront property sometimes in Arizona because we're going, you have a blind optimism. No, we've met people who are glass half full because the ball bounces their way, and God bless those people. John Hopkins is one of those people. The rest of the world are people like Diane and I, where the ball seems to bounce away from us, and that's all right. But this idea is like hope feels like it belongs to us in a unique way. And by us, I mean the people of God. And so that's what we're going to talk about. All right, you guys can hop back in your seats, and we'll talk about why I think it's difficult to talk about hope outside of the Lord. So we're going to talk about Old Testament hope, and then we're going to talk about New Testament hope. And then we're going to talk about, how do we summarize what we're learning about it. So there's two really big words for hope in the Old Testament. There's a couple more, but the two big ones are yakal and kavah. And yakal has in it a meaning that also means to wait for. So it's like sort of you're just waiting for this thing. But in that waiting, there's an optimism that the thing I'm going to wait for, I believe is going to happen. So I'm not waiting in vain. Like, I think it's going to come. The train is going to come. I believe it's going to come as a part of the yakal. So you're waiting, but you're waiting with a hopeful anticipation. Kavah is to wait as well, but it's an interesting word. It comes from the root kav, which is actually a word for cord. And the idea is like when you pull a cord tight, there's tension. And then when that tension breaks, when the cord breaks and you have that relief of tension, that's hope. Sort of like this tension that you've been under and now you have relief from it, is what the people who study these words think is the root idea behind kavah. And so does that, like when I say that tension breaks, and obviously not just a cord, but then you have it, does that correspond a little bit with how you feel hope? That there's a relief when the thing you've desired comes? Because there was tension? Yeah, I think the part of hope that they're alluding to here is that it's not always easy, right? Like Ukrainians are feeling tension. It's not an easy path to the place that you want to get. And so there's many times that these two words are actually seen together. So we have Job 30:26 and Psalm 135 and Isaiah 51:5. And all these scholars are trying to figure out why they use two different words in these settings. And the best they can come up with is that they think yakal seems to have the full range of meaning, that it can mean wait or hope. So like it can literally be like, oh, I'm just waiting for the train. I'm yakalling for the train. But kavah seems to be in theological settings specifically. So you're not kavahing for the train, unless the train is full of Jesus, and then you kavah for the train. So, but like Job 30:26, it says things like, but when I hoped for good, trouble came. And when I yakaled for light, then darkness came. Or Psalm 135, I rely on the Lord. I rely on him with my whole being. I wait for his assuring word. This rely, it's not on the screen, but the rely word there is kavah. Like I'm trusting in the Lord. I'm trusting in the Lord. And then I yakal for his assuring word. Or Isaiah 51:5, I am ready to vindicate. I'm ready to deliver. And this is God speaking. I will establish justice among the nations. The coastlands will yakal patiently for me. They will kavah in anticipation for the revelation of my power. So they don't really know, like, anytime I was in seminary and we would ask questions like, why would they use yakal and not kavah? I had one professor who would go, that's just how Jewish mothers taught their Jewish children. And then when I got to Greek, they were like, that's just how Greek mothers taught their Greek children. So we don't really know. But this idea, both of these words seem to encapsulate this Old Testament idea of hope. Now, what's interesting is most of the waiting and hoping in the Bible, when you see Yakal and Kavah, it's waiting on God. It's not situational. Overwhelmingly, over half the time these words are used, you're waiting on God to do something. Like Isaiah even says to the people, he's like, you guys are headed for total destruction. There's nothing you can do now. So I will kavah on God to do something for you. Like there's this sense of you're not waiting for a circumstance or a thing. You're waiting for the Lord. This is exactly what he's talking about, Isaiah 5 or Isaiah 8. And so he says, the Lord spoke to me again. These people have rejected the gently flowing waters of Shiloh and melt in fear and on and on. So everything's bad, bad, bad. And he's like, you will be broken, O nations. You will be shattered. Get ready for battle. You'll be shattered. Da, 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 da. And then he's like, but I'm just going to wait for the Lord, is how it ends. And so you're like, okay, Isaiah, like there seems to be something to this. It goes on and on about all this bad stuff. You're going to stumble on the rock. You're going to fall and be seriously injured. You're going to be ensnared and captured. And then at the very end, he says, but I will wait patiently for the Lord. I will wait for him. And so there is this sense of there's nothing more that people can do. They've rejected God fully. Disaster is going to come upon them. So Isaiah doesn't know what else to do but wait for God. And that wait idea is hope for God. So I'm just going to hope in God for his deliverance and his rescue from the people's own rebellion. Psalm 130 has a similar idea. It talks about like what I just read to you, like I'm going to wait on God. And then Psalm 27 says the same thing, like the Lord is my light and my salvation. I fear no one. The Lord protects my life, so I'm afraid of no one. Evil men attack. War is imminent. All this, like, and then just like, I trust the Lord. And then it's like, bad, 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 bad. And he keeps going. And then at the very end, he's like, but I will rely on the Lord. I will be strong and confident because I will rely on the Lord. So this idea of hope, this idea of kavah and yakal is not just, I have hope for a better situation. It's that I'm waiting on God to create that better situation. So the hope is overwhelmingly placed upon God, or that God is himself the one that's going to rescue you. And so we see this over and over and over again in the scriptures. So it's waiting on God. But then the other thing that's really interesting is these kavah and yakal words, they're also associated with things that you're waiting on something from God, something that only God can give. So Alex, you want to grab Job 3:9? Kelsey, do you want to read? You don't. Jess, will you grab Isaiah 59:9? Julie, will you do Jeremiah 13:16? So this is an example of, okay, not only do we hope in God, but we also hope in the things that God brings us. And in these particular examples, we're hoping on the light, which light is, of course, the Lord. No, take your time. This is not Awana, so you will not get a badge for finding it quickly. Yeah. I'm sure Alex would have earned a lot of badges as a child. You had so many? Atta girl. Now we just have cell phones. Like the fact that you still have a Bible is commendable. Yeah.
Here we go. Let its morning stars remain dark. Let it hope for light, but in vain. May it never see the morning light.
Yeah, and so in Job, there's this situation of like there is only darkness around, so we're going to hope in a light to break through. Jess, you have Isaiah.
Yeah, therefore justice is far from us, and righteousness does not reach us. We hope for light, but there is darkness, for brightness, but we live in the night.
What translation is that? See, this is why the CSB is so superior. Read it again, because these words are so important, and I will tell you how the net translates it.
Therefore justice is far from us.
What is far from us?
Justice.
Keep going.
And righteousness does not
What
reach
is far from us? What's the second? There we go. Keep going.
We hope for light, but there is darkness. For brightness, but we live in the night.
That's so good. Okay, so the net, which is from DTS, it's great. I love the net. Don't take away my net privileges. But it says, for this reason, deliverance is far from us. And I guarantee you the word in Hebrew is mishpat. I'd be willing to bet y'all $100. Anybody want to lose $100? And then it says, and salvation does not reach us. And I'd be willing to bet you another $100. That's tzedakah under there, which is justice and righteousness. And then it says, we wait for light. That's part of so like when you're looking for hope in the Old Testament, if you're looking in your English Bibles, overwhelmingly you're going to find words like wait, which is really interesting. Because do any of y'all like to wait?
No.
And do you normally associate wait with hope? But when you think about it, don't you? Yeah, I mean, like when you think about it, you're like, if I'm waiting in anticipation, that's actually hope. But we miss something when we say wait as opposed to hope. Doesn't hope bring out a little bit more nuance there? Which is, again, why the CSB is the superior translation. Okay, you guys, how many of y'all were in the widows class? And y'all asked me, how do we get it changed from busybody to magicians? Do y'all remember that when it was talking about how the widows, they could be translated as magicians or busybody? So I asked the translation committee of the NLT. I asked the New Testament guy who's on that book in the New Testament, and I said, what would it take for that to get changed? And he said, we would need to see at least 20% of the new scholarship coming out on Timothy making that case. He goes, it doesn't have to be the majority, but it can't be one obscure article. I go, it's not one obscure article, it's 2 obscure articles. And what's that? Well, so I said to him, well, you don't update it every year. So right now, you're going to update it. How do we get it changed now if that's what it really says? And he says, well, there's a lot of issues we've got to look at. There's a lot of, oh my gosh. Okay, I'm not supposed to tell y'all any of that. Okay, so I didn't tell y'all that. But I was fascinated by the fact that he says it doesn't have to be the majority. We just need to see commentaries coming out with magician being the case that they make. So that's pretty fascinating. Okay, who did I assign Jeremiah 13:6? Julie?
Give glory to the Lord your God before he brings the darkness, before your feet stumble on the darkening hills. You hope for light, but he will turn it to utter darkness and change it to deep gloom.
What translation is that?
NIV.
This is so good. Read that again. I'm going to read y'all the net after this.
Give glory to the Lord your God before he brings the darkness, before your feet stumble on the darkening hills. You hope for light, but he will turn it to utter darkness and change it to deep gloom.
Okay, give glory. Let me tell you how the net says it. Show the Lord your God the respect that is due him. Do y'all feel like that's the same thing?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay. The young people don't, so let's have a debate. Young people, no, just kidding. Why?
To give glory is to glorify the Lord. You only do that when you're showing him respect and honor.
Do y'all associate respect positively or negatively? It's a negative connotation. So this is the generational difference right here, and I will help you understand this. Millennials have been told their whole life that they have to give respect to people who do not deserve it. And they've seen the upheaval in those organizations and those authority figures. And so now when someone demands respect to a millennial, it's at a minimum a yellow flag. Gen Z is even more adamant because they don't believe they are getting the respect they're due. And when someone explains to them, you're 22, you haven't earned any, they believe they are inherently due the same level of respect as the CEO. So this is a generational thing, which is why I think this is funny. Yeah.
Aretha Franklin.
Yeah. So it's a fascinating. So respect is one of those words in currency. So I don't know if you saw that, but all the millennials in the room just like, they don't like that. So it says, show the Lord, the God, the respect that is due him. Do it before he brings the darkness of disaster. Do it before you stumble in distress, like a traveler on the mountains at twilight. Do it before he turns the light of deliverance you hope for into the darkness and gloom of exile. The Bible is so happy all the time, if y'all didn't know. Okay, let's talk about peace. I'll read this one. Jeremiah 8:15. So we hope in light, and now we hope in peace. Jeremiah 8:15. We hoped for good fortune, but nothing good has come of it. We hoped for a time of relief, but instead we experience terror. And so that good fortune there, it's actually a word that means peace. I probably shouldn't use the net anymore. I feel like you have peace. Yeah, it's interesting. Jeremiah 14:19. Then I said, Lord, have you completely rejected the nation of Judah? Do you despise the city of Zion? Why have you struck us with such force that we are beyond recovery? We hoped for peace, but nothing good has come of it. We hope for a time of relief from our troubles, but experience terror. Did y'all catch that those are like the exact same phrases, but the first time they say a time of relief, and the second time it says peace? So Jeremiah 8:15, we hoped for a time of relief, but instead we hoped for good fortune, but nothing has come of it. Jeremiah 14:19 says, we hoped for peace, but nothing has come of it. Those are the exact same phrases. I think I'm talking to the wrong translation committee. I need to figure out why they changed that from peace in the earlier one. That's super bizarre. Okay, we search after light. We search after peace. We search after good. We have Job 30:26. When I hoped for good, trouble came. When I expected light, then darkness came. Do y'all catch this? Like this same idea keeps showing up in the Psalms and Isaiah and in Job. Like we wanted this, but we didn't get it. So what does that tell you about hope in the Old Testament? Do they eventually get it? Does the light eventually, there you go. Pre what?
Pre-Advent.
Yes. Do you get it immediately? Do they all eventually get what they want?
Saluted it from afar.
They saluted it from afar, yes. Moses could only write about what Elizabeth and Zechariah experienced, right? So part of this hope is they are all hoping for a great light. They're hoping for really, now are they going to get a great light? Who is the great light that's going to dawn? That's right. But did Job get to experience it? No. Certainly not. Did Isaiah get to experience it? What does that teach you about hope?
Sometimes you don't get it until you get to heaven.
It has to have,
It's long. It's long.
and it has to have that kavah, that snap.
Was it its darkest, right? When?
Right before it snaps.
Right before that thing snaps. They want justice. Isaiah 59:11. If this does not say justice, it doesn't. Thank you.
We all growl like bears and moan like doves. We hope for justice, but there is none. For salvation, but it is far from us.
Does anyone want to lose $300? I guarantee you that word is mishpat. I don't know why they're translating it that way. That's so weird. Anyways, so what I'm building here, though, is hope in the Old Testament is not simply a theological word that always just says, okay, hope is just like this, we believe the situation is going to get better. Instead, it is, yeah, of course it is. Nobody bet me because nobody's going to bet me on that. But hope instead is, hey, we have this belief in the person of Yahweh. And because of our belief in the person of Yahweh, we also believe in the things that Yahweh is about, which is light and peace and goodness and mishpat, which means justice, not deliverance. And so this idea of Old Testament hope. It's not always realized. You don't have to get past the Psalms to see that. So hope is also not individual in the Old Testament. Do you notice how many times it says we as we've been reading these passages? Do you think of hope as an individual thing or a communal thing? Or both? There you go. Yeah, I'm not a dualist, so usually you can say both or say C if I don't give you a C option. Yeah, but this idea of, hey, the Israelites got everything. Now, did that particular Israelite? Maybe not. But the Israelites got every single promise Yahweh made to them. Did they not? So sometimes hope is also understanding I belong to a community that's bigger than me. Hope in God is accentuated when you see how it's negatively portrayed when you hope in mortals. So not only is hope is landing on the Lord, but you can also see that when you place your hope in things that are not God, it often leads to disaster for you. And so Psalm 69:20, it says that their insults are painful and make me lose heart. I hope for sympathy, but I receive none. I hope for comforters, but I find none. And the psalmist is like, I'm looking out, I'm putting my hands forward and saying, man, I'm really hurting here. Would someone help me? And the psalmist is like, no. Now, who ends up being his comforter? Not the people, but who comforts you? Who comforts the afflicted? Who comforts the brokenhearted? Yeah, you guys get it. It's not a trick question. God puts his hope in the people and they disappoint him. I did this for my narrative lectionary the other week, and I was like, poor God. He just keeps giving stuff to his vineyard, and they just keep doing dumb things. So Isaiah 5:7, Israel is the vineyard of the Lord of heaven's armies. The people of Judah are the cultivated place in which he took delight. He waited for justice, but look what he got. It says, so he hoped for justice, but he got disobedience. He hoped for fairness, but look what he got. He got cries for help from the vulnerable. He planted seeds of justice and righteousness, and he got disobedience and cries from the vulnerable. So God's like, hey, if you think people are going to be your deliverer, do you want to know what people are like? I planted good seed and a bad crop grew out of it. Do you know how messed up of a seed you have to be a good seed and a bad crop come out? Like, that doesn't even exist. How many of y'all have planted corn and squash came out? Never, right? This is like a different level of planting. But Micah 5:7, not to be all doom and gloom on our hope, is a very positive example. So Micah 5:7 is a prophecy of what it'll be like when things are set right. And he says, those survivors from Jacob will live in the midst of many nations, and they will be like the dew the Lord sends, like the rain on the grass, which we've talked about this before, how dew and rain are so vital to the ancient Near East. And these people, so this remnant, these people will be like dew and they'll be like rain. They'll be refreshing. They'll be a good thing. They do not hope for men to come or wait around for humans to arrive. And what Micah is saying is these people who are put back in the land, they no longer put their trust in foreign armies. They no longer put their trust in people to come rescue them. Their trust is squarely put on the Lord to be their provider and their protector. So Micah is saying there's a day coming when the people of God will stop trusting in men and finally will put their hope where it belongs, which is on Yahweh. It's really fascinating. So the Bible is not only saying, hey, here's positive examples of hope. Here's examples of people who haven't quite seen the day that they're hoping for, but communally we have. And then there's examples of, if you put your hope in something other than God, you might find that there's only calamity waiting for you. But there's a day coming when the people of God will place their hope where it squarely belongs, which is on Yahweh. Which is why you have a hard time defining hope without Christian jargon, because you're trying to be Micah 5:7 people, right? And I made you pagans and heretics by asking the question. Hope in the New Testament, so that's the Old Testament. Hope in the New Testament is a Greek word, elpis. That should be a penultimate sigma. There's a different S when an S is at the end of the word. Do y'all remember when Emily was here, the word nerd, who's now doing training? She used to bust me for this. Y'all remember this? But I can't figure out how to change it. So what are you going to do? But it's elpis. So the Septuagint is the Greek translation of the Old Testament. Okay, so we have the Hebrew Old Testament, and then around the turn of the century, a bunch of scholars got together, 70 of them. That's why it's called the Septuagint, and they translated the Old Testament into Greek because that was the language of the people, and they wanted to be able to read their Old Testament. And so you would expect hope. You would expect this Greek word hope to go replace kavah and yakal, because that's the Greek word hope. So every time we saw kavah and yakal, you would expect that to be what it replaces, right? If you're going to go translate hope from the Old Testament. What's really interesting is overwhelmingly, it actually replaces the word batah, which means trust. Batah, because the New Testament people who understood hope believed that there was an element not just in waiting for God to do something, but in trusting him. So hope in the New Testament expands beyond waiting for God to act on your behalf into a complete, wholehearted trust that God is going to do what he says he's going to do. So Psalm 16:9 is an example of this. Psalm 16 is a psalm of protection. Protect me, O God, for I've taken shelter in you. You are the Lord. You're my source of well-being. Basically we come to you, and it says, my heart rejoices, and I am happy, and my life is safe. And this idea of, like, I'm rejoicing, I'm happy because I'm safe. I'm cared for by you. I have this great trust that you are exactly who you say you're going to be. So it's really fascinating that it's not a one-to-one ratio. So for the New Testament authors, they think that hope is not just this idea of the tension in your waiting, but also you're able to do that because you trust Yahweh. And if you see the way that Paul writes about faith, hope, and love, what does he say about those three?
Grace and love.
Yeah. But three will remain in the end. There's three enduring virtues for Paul: faith, hope, and love. And for him, those are tied together. Now, one is preeminent, right? Don't ever get confused. Above all else is going to be love. But that faith and hope, he's like, those are virtues of the Christian life. Those are the highest three virtues of the Christian life, are people of faith, people of hope, and people of love. And for Paul, he understands that hope and faith, hope and trust, those hold hands. You cannot divorce those two ideas. And you see it all throughout his letters. So hope for the New Testament times is not just anticipation of a better future, but it's also trust in a God to bring it about. So it's expanding this idea. Hope is not directed to anything specific. And nor does it project its own view of the future, but it consists rather in general confidence in God's protection and help. This is what the Theological Dictionary in the New Testament says. But it also expands in the New Testament. It now includes hoping in men. So what's interesting is in the Old Testament, what do we say about hoping in men? Da na 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 na. And then we get to Paul and he's like, yeah, I hope in you all. And you're like, dude, did you not read Micah? But what's fascinating is he hopes in them because they have Christ. So in the same way, you cannot love until you have been loved. Whatever love you had was an imitation, or because of God's general grace upon your life, you were able to love. But all of us who have matured in Christ understands that the love we have now compared to the love we had before we were loved by God and understood we were loved by God, not the same. How many of y'all, the more you understand God's love for you, your love for others expands? That's the point. So Paul's saying, hey, if you have found the one in whom your hope is placed, then you can also hope in the others who have that shared hope. So Paul expands this idea of hope to say, no, I can hope in Alex to do the right thing because Alex has Christ in her. And Christ in her, the hope of the world, the glory of the world, is enough for me to now say, no, I hope in her. Now, she's not going to rescue me. And there's so much I can't ask Alex to do. But I can place my hope in her to be a steady companion in this life of what God is calling us to do. So it's really fascinating that Paul expands that out. And hope is no longer just the coming of the Messiah. We hope in God's deliverance. We hope in God. We hope in God. Well, now for us and for Paul, that day came. And so now it expands out to an eschatological hope, bigger. It got bigger. It's no longer just, hey, we need God to come. It's we believe God's going to restore the cosmos. I mean, you hear the way Paul talks about hope in Romans. It's not just, oh, someday we're going to go to heaven. It's like, no, the creation, which currently groans, will cease to suffer under the dominion of sin and darkness that we are currently under. And hope is no longer waiting for Yahweh to show up on the scene. It's waiting for Yahweh to change the entire universe in a place that does not have any darkness whatsoever. No darkness, no shame, no brokenness, no pain. And so it is a fully realized eschatology that we now currently wait, which is why Advent still matters. Because how many of y'all got everything you want in this Christian life right now? Would y'all like it to get a little bit better? Would y'all like it to get a lot better? Yeah. So we don't have all that we want. So Advent isn't just like saying, oh, back in the day we waited for Jesus, but we got it all. Like, no, how many of y'all would like a day to come that you're not suffering? Or all those relationships that you want to see made whole will be made whole. Or people who are no longer with us, don't you want to see them again? That's the Advent we're currently in, is there's a bigger waiting that we're in. And so they waited, and now we wait. We waited, and now we're still waiting in this Advent. But that is how hope in the New Testament, it got much, much bigger. It's sort of like, well, Paul's like, if we got Jesus, then let's ask for the whole thing now. Like, let's just get all of it now. And that's the Advent that we're currently in. And then the New Testament talks about Christ himself as our hope. So they were saying, hey, we're waiting for Yahweh. The Yahweh that came was the second person of the Trinity, Jesus Christ. He is our hope. So hope's not just an idea. Hope is a person. And so Paul says this in Colossians 1. God wanted to make known to them the glorious riches of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. He wanted to make known to the Gentiles what it is that life is all about. Like, where are the glorious riches to be found, dear Gentiles? And it is going to be found Christ in you, which is the hope of glory. How many of y'all believe you walk around with the embodiment and hope inside of you? Yeah. Not an easy affirmation, but maybe you put it on your, bathroom mirror. I'm the hope of glory because Christ is in me. But this is why y'all have a hard time talking about hope without any Christian jargon. Because why are y'all confident this too shall pass? Christ, yeah. You were so nervous to say Jesus' name, but you know that's always the right answer. Yeah, like this idea that because you're indwelt by God, you walk around with the embodiment of hope. You also walk around with the embodiment of love and justice, or if you're the net, you call it deliverance, but whatever. Like you, because of Christ in you, you have the hope of glory. It's a pretty incredible thing that Paul is saying to a bunch of Gentiles who desired greater glory. And he's like, you want glory? There's a Jewish carpenter that lives inside of this rinky-dink church. If you actually want glory, you got to go down the road to Ephesus, and you'll find it there. Go down the road to Colossae, you'll find it there. Amazing idea. To a world obsessed with glory, here's Paul. No, I know where glory's at. It's in Rufus. It's in Barnabas. It's in Jim. As a virtue, talking about hope, this is the dictionary of Paul in his letters. The dictionary came out this year. They say it's as a virtue, hope being a virtue, it engenders a positive spirit in the way life is lived, as a transitory state en route to a blissful eschatological end. So when you were talking about positivity earlier, Karen, that's exactly right. That the fruit of hope in our lives is not just confidence that we're headed to an eschatological state of bliss, but the fruit of it creates in us a positive outlook. It is a person of faith that can say this too shall pass when you've got stage 4 cancer, or when you don't think your marriage is going to make it, or your kid's sick, or whatever it is. Like today, I got a text from my sister-in-law, and she was like, this is the text that you dread. So my nieces and nephews go to UConn public schools. There was a threat made on social media that a gunman was going to come to UConn Middle School, which is where my oldest niece currently goes to school. And so my sister-in-law gets the text, and then my niece, she texts my niece, and they're not allowed to have their phones out during school. So she's a rule follower. We don't know where she came from, because nobody in our family does that. But and so she replied. So my sister-in-law said, "Hey, Jaden, are you okay?" And she said, "I'm really scared. Like they're saying they're going to shoot up the school at 2 p.m. It was about 1:45. And she goes, "And they just called me to the office, and I don't know why." And Ashley says, "You're not going to the office. Daddy's going to come get you." And so my brother drove up there, and by 1:50, my niece was no longer at school. And she got home, and she just like threw her arms around my sister-in-law. And my niece is pretty steady Eddie. Like she's not, And then she just said, "I don't want to go to school tomorrow." And she said, "Okay." So they're going to stay home and watch Grey's Anatomy all day. I'm like, I can think of a million things better for a 13-year-old, but whatever. But I was thinking about that so my heart then says, great, we're homeschooling, like problem solved. But I'm going to have a conversation with her in 2 weeks when I'm in Oklahoma to talk about this is not as it should be. And you are under a tyranny of out-of-control gun laws that cause you as a 13-year-old to consider that you could be hurt. And that is not how it should be. And I have great confidence that we're headed to a day where you will not experience that anymore. But that confidence comes from a God who I believe will take us into a future. But right now, we're under that tension, that cord. So we live in that tension, but it doesn't mean that there's still not fruit of positive spirit. So somehow we live in a world where we know guns exist and kids get shot, and we believe better days are to come, and we're still going to have a positive attitude, and yet we grieve that my niece got picked up from school today. And we still don't know why the office called her to the office. I was like, she would never do anything wrong. So I also am like, bad timing. But that's the place, like, how do you live in this tension and still be positive? And I think only Christians who have this deep-rooted belief in who God is as the one who is hope figure that out over time. It doesn't mean you don't have seasons of depression. It doesn't mean you don't have seasons of sadness. It doesn't mean like you just, your dog dies right in front of you and you go, well, that's all right. We have hope for better. Like, I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying this is a disposition of life that the fruit of hope produces in us. And homeschool your kids. So I'm just kidding. We're all the product of public schools, and so I don't have any big opinions about it really from an educational standpoint. But I was telling my sister-in-law, because she was talking about homeschooling the kids once, I was like, I don't think you're smart enough. She was like, I don't either. And it was not really a commentary on my sister-in-law so much as the commentary on the kids. I was like, I don't think anybody is able to teach the youngest. So. This is from the Erdman's Dictionary of the Bible. And so what we're going to do is every time I get to a part that's in red, I want you guys to respond to it by. So this is what they say about hope. This is their big summary of hope. The stated object of Christian hope is variously identified. It is the future hope of the resurrection of the dead. Why do we hope for that? Why are we hoping for the resurrection of the dead? These are obvious answers. You don't have to, I just want you to think about it.
We won't stay dead.
We won't stay dead, yeah. And who's waiting for the resurrection of the dead? And when I say that, so let me say this. After my sister died, every time we quoted the Apostles' Creed, there was one person I had in mind every time. Now it's not. Now it's someone else. But how many times have you thought, when you've said the Apostles' Creed, you've thought, I miss so-and-so? Why do we hope in the promises given to Israel? Are we now Israel? This is a little bit of a theology thing. So this is actually, I realize, if you've been in dispensationalism categories, you're like, we don't really care. Yes, we do, because we now grafted into Israel if you're not a dispensationalist. So therefore, their promises belong to, there we go. And are they still waiting on some promises? Yes, okay. Why do we hope in the redemption of the body and the whole creation? The physical body.
So you don't keep getting COVID.
So you don't keep getting COVID, Larry. Listen, I'm really looking forward to the redemption of the body. Some of y'all's bodies work. Mine does not. How many of y'all got achy joints? Yeah. How many of y'all are looking forward to having no period in the new heavens and the earth?
I am.
How many of y'all, when you look at your aging pets, or frankly, you see a tree cut down and you just think, man, that was a redwood. Like, how many of y'all watch wildfires and you think, that's really profoundly sad? Yeah, we'll have redwoods in the new heavens and the earth. They'll be back. Why do we hope in eternal glory?
Because of the suffering we go through here.
That is right. Y'all sick of being at the bottom of the totem pole? Y'all know what it's like to be at the top? If you do, woe to you. Climb on down with the rest of us, is what Philippians 2 would say to you, because you will be exalted in the end. Why do we hope in eternal life and the inheritance of the saints?
Getting back to where we came from.
Yeah, is this enough for
We don't
y'all?
know what it's like.
How many circles around the sun would you need for you to feel like you had enough?
Huh? Say that again?
How many circles around the sun do you feel like you would need to say, I had enough, I don't need eternal life? This is good. You have a number? No, you don't have a number. Okay,
I
yeah.
have a comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, one.
Yeah, what?
One really big one. I was just thinking the movies like, can't remember, think of any of the movies, but where they talk about where there's a paradise, that's built into human beings. To go back to that place of paradise.
Yeah, we're homesick.
Yeah.
Yeah, we long for a place.
You don't really know what it is.
Yeah. I think that's when you say, when God says, I put eternity on your heart. I don't think people realize that it reaches not only forward to Revelation 21, but it reaches backward to Genesis 1. That if you take the Hebrew text at good face value, God was trying to say, you were always meant to live in eternity in the garden with me. So I have to go restore the garden now and bring you home. But there's this longing. Now, what's funny is when we get to Revelation, for all of you who are not country folk, it's a city in the end. So country folk have to learn to live in the city. So all of us urban dwellers have a head start in the new heavens and the new earth.
It's got a lot of trees.
Like I always see you see those pastoral settings and I think, oh, that's so that seems so nice. And then I go out to the country and I think to myself, yeah, this is nice. And then 4 days later, I'm like, no, I need traffic and good food and sports. Like I am such an urban person and I want to not be, but I am. I just am. So the return of Christ, why do we hope in the return of Christ? That seems pretty obvious. How many of y'all would like to meet the one who saved you?
Oh, yeah.
Do y'all ever imagine what that'll be like what you're going to say to him? Thanks, it's the best I can come up with. What about why do we hope in the transformation into the likeness of Christ? Why are we hoping in being made like Christ?
Tired of falling, tired of stumbling, being broken.
No more shame.
Sick of hurting people, sick of being hurt, sick of feeling like Why do we hope in the salvation of God? That one's obvious. You don't have to answer that one. The Old Testament emphasis on trust and patient waiting is kept in the New Testament. So that old sense of we trust and we wait is kept in the New Testament. And Christians are to trust in God's continuing deliverance and protection. And so this is how the dictionary sums it up. Hope is produced by endurance through suffering. It's not without suffering. That's the part of the waiting. We waited for this and it didn't come. We suffered until it came. Those who hope in Christ will not be put to shame. Will not be put to shame. but will be given courage to see Christ exalted in life and in death. If you hope in Christ, you will not be made foolish. It will not be easy. The path is rocky, but you will not be put to shame. So back in your groups, how would you describe hope using whatever jargon you want? Now you can go back to your acronym. It works. It's perfect. It'll take just a few minutes. All right, we'll pull you guys back. How would y'all define hope using whatever words you want? Or what words would end up in your definition? It will all be made right in the end. That is a deeply faithful phrase. What about you guys? Acronym HOPE? Yeah. Yeah, that's good. So this is super succinct. You'll definitely be able to say this to the person you're talking to at Starbucks. But this is what I said. This is what my summary from my study. Hope is a confident, and confidence matters, disposition toward the future because you have placed your trust in a God who has been completely faithful in the past and present. And that confidence allows you to face uncertainty and suffering now because your hope lies in a person who can't be unfaithful. So hope means we say, this too shall pass, and mean it. Hope is a virtue of the Christian and requires personal and communal practice by remembering. This is my definition of hope. I hope it ends up in a dictionary someday. Just kidding. So when I decided to do an Advent tap, we don't normally do tap in December if y'all haven't been with us. And the reason why I decided to do it is because for me, I really enjoy Christmas season, but it gets busy. It just gets busy. So we have my niece's birthday, my uncle's birthday, parties, feasts, all that stuff. And I just was like, it's too easy to move through Christmas without any rhythms. So part of what I wanted to do in this class was to also give you guys a chance to carve out time for you to say, okay, let me take a beat and ask myself, for me, what does this mean? And so what we're going to do is a little exercise. You guys have your sticky notes there. I suggest you write on the fat part of the marker so we can all see it. And this is a little vulnerable, so you can write in coded language if you don't want to share, especially your future host. But here's what we're going to do. You're going to use your sticky note and your pen, and you're going to write down moments of God's past faithfulness. Because if hope is a communal and an individual response to say, this is stuff we remind. So you can write down, and you can do more than one. You don't have to do one. But I want you to think about, and maybe everybody should do at least two. One being something God historically did. He split the Red Sea. He freed this, whatever your thing is that you say, man, when I think about God doing that in the past, that conjures up more than just that's significant to me. That's one of my favorite stories in the Bible. That's one of my favorite stories God did in history, okay? And then something God has done in your life. It can be big or small, but something meaningful that you say, I remember when God did that, right? So I want you to think of a historical moment, and then I want you to think of something personal for you. And then, where is it easy to misplace hope? Your finances, your job, your spouse, your parent, your whatever that thing is. And you don't have to be super, but and maybe you think philosophically, people in general misplace their trust. You don't have to necessarily tell us where you place your trust. But where is it hey, sometimes I believe a better day is to come because I get so many likes on Instagram, or I get whatever that thing is. So then you're going to put it on misplaced hope. And then, given God's past faithfulness, and given the fact that we're not going to place our hope on anything in that middle section, what's something in the future that we hope God does? Historical and personal. So 2 for here too, okay? You guys understand what hope is. So for Advent, you're going to write down your one sentence. Oh, I took all your things back. Sorry. You can put it in your phone. You can grab this. But what is one sentence that you can pray to God every morning? And I want you to think of a rhythm in your life, something you do every day without fail. Brush your teeth, so put it on your mirror. Drink coffee every morning, put it by your coffee maker. Drive to work, you put it on a sticky note on your whatever. What is your daily routine? And pick something. And I want you to put your prayer. And this is your prayer. God, because you are the one who, whatever you want to put from the past, I can hope for you to. And what are you asking him for? Be my hope this Advent. That's your prayer. It's that simple. You're going to pray this every day. You're going to pick a time. If it's your coffee, you pet your dog, take your dog for a walk. Wherever you're going to put this, you're going to put this somewhere. Maybe you put an alarm in your phone. Every time at this time, it's going to go off. And I'm going to pray this prayer as a reminder in this Advent season. As I prepare for the coming of Christ, I want to be reminded that my hope is in God. and nowhere else. And this Advent season is an invitation to enter into this rhythm and to be reminded of it. So God, because you are the one who provides the ram, I can trust you to meet my every need, or whatever it is that you're going to pray. Be my hope this Advent.